Change your words and you change your world. When sales professionals were asked, what's the number one mistake? What's the number one mistake they see other salespeople make in their sales presentations? You know what was their answer? They said other sales presentations are boring, boring, and boring. Yet, when the same sales professionals were asked to quote their top 3 mistakes they make in their own presentations, boring was none of them. Sales is all about having powerful conversations. Sales is all about having impactful conversations. This course is on power messaging. What is power messaging? Power messaging is a unique selling skill which is based on the science, how brain takes decisions. It's based on the science, how your buyer makes decisions. Top salespeople use power messaging. Use power messaging to create a unique buying experience. To let them differentiate from the rest of the competitors and compel their prospects to make a decision in their favor. I am in pre-sales for the last 20 years. I've advised, consulted, and successfully coached the top executives of the Fortune 1000 companies. I've also seen sales who accomplished 40% better quota performance when using power messaging. Join this masterclass only if you are serious about spicing up your sales conversations. See you there.
Change your words and you change your world. Change your words and you change your world. Our words have power. Our words have a lot of power. Before we move ahead with the second and the last episode of Power Messaging, I would like to start with a quick question. What do you see? What is this? It's a coffee cup, right? Could also be used for a teacup. So it's a coffee cup or a teacup. My question is, what do you think is more important? The coffee, which is inside this cup, or this cup? I would appreciate if you share your answers and your thoughts via the chat window or via the comments section on the Facebook Live. So I repeat myself, what do you think is more important, this cup or the coffee? And while you are sharing your thoughts, let me share an example with you, because it's not the first time I've asked this question. I've asked this question several times in the past. And whenever I showed this cup, everyone said coffee is more important. And sometimes I had the chance to show this cup. And when I showed this cup, most of the people said this cup is more important. So anyways, jokes aside, I am keen to understand your thoughts. And let me share with you, while you're sharing your thoughts, that most people believe that the coffee is important. And if you also are thinking the same, I have another question for you. What would be the case if you have this cup, a broken cup? I guess the answer is quite simple. When the cup is broken, there is no coffee, there is no tea. No coffee without a cup. Yes or yes? Yes. Translate this example now to a business world. The coffee or the tea represents the content or the presentation. So the content could be this presentation on power messaging. The content could be another conversation on a different topic that you want to do with your customer. This cup represents the context. It represents how you deliver that presentation, how you deliver that talk. Most of the times, we are guilty that we are only focused on the content. You don't even care about the context. As I already mentioned, without the cup, no coffee. So without the context or without focusing on the context, you can't convey the value or the message that you want to convey with your content. This is what we are going to cover in today's course on the second last episode, in fact, the last episode on power messaging. So in our first episode, we focused on the first 3 techniques of power messaging. We learned how to message to the old brain, how we could resonate well with the emotional old brain of the buyer. We also learned how we could avoid the attention hammock during a presentation. We have to start with something which grabs people's attention. We have to close with something which is hot, and we have to spike the middle. We also learned the technique of how we could use big pictures to increase the retention rate. Today, we are going to focus on the remaining 3 techniques. We're going to learn how we should handle the objections that we get during the buying process. The 5th technique that we are going to learn today is how we could leverage stories to make ourselves memorable. Last but not least, we are also going to learn the you phrasing, how we could use phrasing to be considered as part of the tribe, as part of the family, to get the buy-in from the buyers. And once again, power messaging is all about having powerful conversations, having impactful conversations. It's not focusing on the content, it focuses on the context that you need to deliver your content properly. So let's start with the first technique of today, objections that we get throughout the sales engagement. We all, in a selling business, we know that we are selling to prospects. Prospects are humans, not robots, at least not today. And when you are selling to humans, humans have emotions. And during every sales engagement, it's natural to expect that you're going to receive objections. In fact, if you ask me how many times I have received objections during the sales engagements, 100%. Almost 100% in every engagement, I have come across objections. Of course, the nature of objections vary from opportunity to opportunity, but it's a well-known fact that you can't have a sales process or sales cycle or sales engagement without receiving those objections. But the problem is, sometimes these objections are emotional. Sometimes these objections are stubborn. And these objections are stubborn and emotional. Why? Because they are rooted in the emotional old brain. They are not rooted in the analytical neocortex or new brain. And if this is the case, if you want your discussion to move forward, you have to reframe the discussion. You have to reframe the objection in a way that addresses that negative energy and converts that into a positive energy. Sounds complicated. Let me explain it with an example. And let me start with a personal example, I would say a very personal example before I share a business example. My mom, she is a very emotional person. A couple of years ago, she was very sick and she had to take a lot of medicines for her blood pressure, for sugar, for many kinds of problems. And she was not very punctual in taking those medicines. So every day, she was skipping some of the medicines, and that was impacting her health. The results were getting really bad and worse over time. So I was speaking with her on a daily basis, and I was encouraging her to take all those medicines punctually without skipping them. And I was reminding her that the effects on her health and what she is causing her by not taking those medicines properly or punctually. To be honest, um, she was not listening, and the problem continues to happen. One day, I got really very frustrated. I literally lost my control, and I just told her that, Mom, if you're not going to take those medicines, I'm not going to speak with you. And I just hanged up the phone. The next morning, my family told me, my siblings told me that she took all the medicines. I learned a lesson that day. What I learned was, as long as I was giving her all the logic, all the reasons that were those reasons, that logic, that what the impact on her health and all that stuff was not compelling enough for her. But when she realized that her son is not going to speak with her, she immediately listened. She immediately listened to that emotional response that I gave. And that's the thing. When the objection is emotional, the response also needs to be emotional. I repeat myself. When your buyer is giving an emotional objection, you can't handle that with a rational reply. The response needs to counter that objection in an emotional way. Translating that to the business world, how many times, how often do we come across pricing objections from our buyers? Almost all the time. 99%, 100%. Most of the times, in every opportunity, we do come across pricing objections from our buyers. Yes or yes? Yes. What do we typically do? What we do in sales when we come across those pricing objections? Share your answers during the chat section. Feel free to share your thoughts. What do sales and pre-sales do when they come across these pricing objections from the buyers? For the sake of time, I'm going to answer it. Most of the sales immediately go for discounting. They immediately start offering discounting to customers. What do pre-sales do? Sales engineers do. They start explaining and justifying their product, their value proposition, or their solution by going into the details of functions and features and what they do, which makes them special from others and so on. This happens most of the time. Whenever a pricing objection is raised, sales go into discounting and sales engineers start going into function and features discussion. You know what's the problem with this approach? This is exactly what buyers expect that vendors will do when they raise a pricing objection. And we are just getting trapped into their game by doing exactly what they are anticipating. I'm a firm believer that when you have sold on value, discounting is not required. I repeat, when you have sold on value, discounting is not required. Value selling does not need discounting. So I'll share another example here, again, my own example here, that some years ago, or to be precise, almost 7 years ago, I was negotiating a very big deal in Germany, in mid of Germany, with one of our customers. And they told me that, Mr. Minhas, your pricing is too high, too expensive. I listened to that objection properly. I listened to them. And then I shared my example with them. It was the winter time, and I told them that I was returning from Innsbruck to Munich, from Austria to Germany, and my car, together with my family, and my car was hit by a snowstorm, and it was very difficult to drive in that storm. Thankfully, I reached home, or the family reached home safe and sound. When I reached home, I thanked God, first of all, and then I thanked my four-wheel drive that made that possible. You know why I shared that example? I shared that example for two reasons. It shows that I spent more on something for which I was thankful later on. Secondly, that example or that response was emotional. Why? Because it was around the safety and security of the family. When I shared that example, we didn't have any further discussion on the pricing. The deal was already sold. So, just to summarize, you're going to get objections in a sales engagement all the time. But whenever there is an objection, there is a reason. Whenever there is a problem, there is an opportunity. It's all about reframing the question to innovate your thinking. Objection reframing is all about understanding the emotional stubbornness that is behind that objection and converting that negative energy into a positive energy so that you can take the discussion forward from there. I'm going to share an example with you. Long time ago, in 2006 or 2007, almost like 13, 14 years ago, Volkswagen in the United States got a very big objection. They were labeled as very expensive vehicle, very expensive car. What they did, they didn't drop their prices. They handled that objection in a very different way. I don't want to reveal the surprise. I like to share these videos with you so that you could see how they handled that objection which they received 14 years ago, being a very expensive car in the United States. Some of these videos are very old, so the quality is not that good, but you should be able to at least get the message. Enjoy.
So what do you think?
I like it.
Yeah, I know, but they've been making parachutes for 50 years.
What about this one?
It's not as rigorously tested. The stitching isn't as good, but yeah.
So does the job, right?
Yeah.
Cheers.
Tell you what, why don't I throw in this little beauty too?
Obviously. Get in.
Come on.
By 2006, there was plenty of bad news at Volkswagen. A once beloved brand had lost its relevance and suffered 5 consecutive years of sales declines. But there was a bright spot within it all. Both Jetta and Passat happened to include a rather impressive laundry list of German-engineered safety features. An intelligent crash response system, 6 standard airbags, anti-lock braking system, electronic brake pressurized distribution, a lower anchor and tether system, electronic stabilization program, active seat restraints, crash-optimized front end, anti-intrusion side door beams, and a 5-star front side impact rating. Unfortunately, when you put it that way, it's a big snore. Most automobile safety ads relied on the same old formula: controlled collisions in controlled environments with simulated human beings, and always talked about avoiding the accident. This was the inspiration for Safe Happens.
It just gives me the feeling like she's not like listening to me.
Have you tried not saying like every other word?
What?
Remember your ski trip story?
Yeah.
I was like going down the hill and like this guy like cut me off and like there was a crowd and like
come on, that's
and I was
not
like,
me.
look, stuff either happens or it doesn't happen. Stuff doesn't sort of like happen. Holy.
On the web, Safe took a more lighthearted turn as surfers managed to survive internet dings in the same way that drivers encounter surprises along the road. Boink. On banners that clicked right through to VWFeatures.com. At VWFeatures.com, shoppers lovingly customize their very own Jettas before using a menu to lovingly pulverize it in equally customizable short films. Letting something safe happens just the way it should, in the most unexpected circumstances. Suddenly, a taboo of car advertising, showing your own car in less than pristine condition, was tossed onto the shoulder like an old shoe. The sight of a crunched Jetta even became somewhat iconic in brochures, ads for auto shows, and even in and around VW dealerships.
Who cried?
I did. Not me.
It was a sad ending and everything. I
I saw you with your hand in your chin.
That's called concentrating on the moment.
It's more like holding your quivering upper lip. Exactly.
I wasn't crying, okay? I mean, seriously, I don't know why.
Safe Happens ignited one of the most robust conversations of the year. And like any good conversation, it started with questions.
But how many stars for the ad?
Does it go too far?
What in the world is VW trying to accomplish here?
Does this make you want to buy the car?
Exactly. Does shock sell or not?
Many are calling the company demanding to know if the actors sustained serious injuries.
While talking heads talked, bloggers blogged, and critics critiqued, consumers, well, consumed. But the brand was listening and saw fit to respond with the 2006 Passat.
So they're just driving along talking about whatever, and suddenly, wham.
I know, I saw it.
Just think maybe they went too far.
I think where they went was real.
But is it just shocking for the sake of shocking?
But being in an accident isn't a shock. That's what they call it, an accident.
Yeah, but you're watching TV, commercial comes on.
From Times Square, this is Good Morning America.
While some might question the tactics behind the new Volkswagen ads, there's no doubt they're working. After a disastrous 2005, sales are up this year by 20%.
This is exactly the way accidents happen. It's perfectly captured. It breaks all the rules of advertising. Everybody's talking about it in the blogosphere and everywhere else, and sales are up.
Dealers relayed anecdotes about customers entering dealerships describing, quote, those freaky Jetta commercials. On showroom floors across the country, the conversation had turned to safe. Safe happens. Proof that when safe becomes just as startling as danger, it magically becomes relevant. Thanks for watching.
Holy. Enough said. Moving to the next technique. What do you see on this slide? I believe all of you know this. Yes, Little Red Riding Hood. How many of you heard the story of Little Red Riding Hood? I assume all of you. Yes or yes? I also assume that you have heard stories like Cinderella, Ali Baba and 40 Thieves, Snow White and Seven Dwarfs. We all heard those stories when we were kids. Our parents, our teachers shared all these stories, told all these stories to us. My question, why our teachers, why our parents told these stories when we were kids? Any ideas? Anyone? Yes, these stories have lessons embedded within them. So my next question, why our parents, why our teachers did not share those lessons just as is, directly? Like, honesty is the best policy, don't bribe, don't do this. Why they didn't just share those lessons to us? I assume you will agree that when you share these lessons as stories, they become memorable. They become long-lasting. Yes or yes? Yes. So stories are memorable. Stories are long-lasting. And I'll share again a personal example here. I consider my father as my mentor. He helped a lot in my grooming throughout my life. Whenever I used to make mistakes, whenever I used to fail, whenever I was gaining some success, he used to coach me by sharing stories, by sharing poems, by sharing riddles, by sharing things hidden inside his style of coaching. The end result or the outcome was that even after 30, 40 years, those lessons stuck here. I still remember all those riddles, all those poems, all those stories that he has shared with me in his own way of coaching. If that is the case, then why stories cannot be used in formal businesses? In fact, I have to tell you that our customers would love to hear these stories. They would love to understand if we have helped customers like them in the past. They would also like to understand if similar problem was faced by someone else and how we helped and guided and solved that problem with that customer. Our customers love to hear these stories, and it's important that we use strategic storytelling also in business presentations. Many of you might think that we already use stories during sales presentations. Typically, we have a slide with a lot of logos, a lot of references. However, I have to admit that's not storytelling. Every vendor has a slide with a lot of logos, a lot of references. And when you just present that slide, it is like doing what everyone does. And if I do what everyone does, it becomes normal. And normal is boring. Yes. What I suggest is, what my tip is, that take one of those logos, take one of those customers as an example, and share a personalized story. Share where was the customer, what was the pain the customer was facing, how you got involved, how you helped and guided the customer in addressing that pain and providing a value to the customer in the end. In fact, I also suggest that use a contrast in your story. Depict a world, a painful world, a worst place, a miserable world where the customer was living before, where there was the problem, where there was the pain. Show the journey, how you transform that customer and ultimately make that place a better place to work or better place to live, and everything become green and sunny again. So show that contrast. Why I'm focusing on the contrast? Because a story and a contrast both appeal to the emotional old brain. And remember what we learned in the episode 1 last week, we have to become appealing to the emotional old brain of the buyer. So using stories together with the contrast helps you doing that, because both are appealing to the human old brain, and this is what we need to do to become ourselves, to become memorable for our buyers. The last technique that we are going to cover today is you phrasing. You phrasing is one of the techniques of power messaging. And before I explain you phrasing, let me share some facts with you. When you are having a conversation with your buyer or your prospect, and you are perceived as outside, you are perceived as a stranger, it will be very difficult for you to gain or to get the buy-in from the customer. You have to personalize your message in a way that you are perceived as member of the family. You're perceived as the member of the tribe. And this is going to get you the buy-in from your prospect. We all know in sales, it's never about us. It's never about us. It's always about you, where you is the customer, where you is your buyer, you is your prospect. So you phrasing is much more than just switching from a first or third person narrative to a second person narrative. Let me explain that with an example. We are used to think in terms of I or me or we or us. We are programmed to this way of thinking. So for example, if I'm introducing a new value proposition to the market, if I'm launching a new product to the market, the very first thoughts which get into my mind are, what is in it for me? What's the value for me? What do I want? I want everyone to know this message X. These are the very first thoughts that come to my mind. You phrasing forces us to break this typical thought pattern. We have to get out of this thought pattern. We have to put ourselves into the shoes of our buyers. We have to put ourselves into the shoes of our customers and think from their perspective. What do our customers want? What do our buyers want? What is the value for the buyer? What is in it for the buyer? How this message X would land with the buyer? What is the value of this message X for the buyer? The more we practice you messaging, the easier it becomes for us to think from a buyer perspective. Having said that, there are some rules which you phrasing has to follow. So there is first of all, there's a rule that it has to make sense from a both grammar as well as from a thematic perspective. So when you are uttering a sentence, you needs to be the subject as well as the direct focus of that sentence. Let me explain that with some examples. So I'll share some examples with you, and I'm keen to understand what do you think, if these are you messages or not. So let's look at the first example. I'm only asking you for 90 seconds of your time. What do you think? Share in the comment section or the chat section if you think it's a you phrasing or not. And while you do that, let's look at the sentence. Here, the subject is I, and you is the direct object. So definitely, this is not a you phrase. Let's look at another example. We have an amazing offer for you. This is even worse. Here, the subject is we, but the focus is on the amazing offer. And to be honest, if you look at this sentence, if you take the last two words out for you, the sentence is complete anyways. We have an amazing offer. So you could deliver your meaning without even relying on the word you. So this is even a worse example. Let's look at another example. You won't believe what we have to offer. What do you think about it? The subject here is you, all right? So is this a you phrase? Yes or no? Yes or no? Share your thoughts. For the sake of time, let me answer that. This is where I say that you are using you just as a rhetoric. Of course, you have used you, but the focus is on unbelievable offer. You're offering something which is unbelievable. You don't really care about the person or the individual. So this is where you're using you as a rhetoric, but from a sentence perspective, it's not you phrasing. Another example. If you are not the right person to talk to, can you please blah, blah, blah. A very, very bad example. Here you're focusing on that, okay, I, the most important person, want to speak with the right person. I don't even really care about whether you are the right person or not. So you're focusing on a right person that you want to speak to and you want to discuss something. The other person that you're speaking to have no value for you. And this is where you have to understand that if you are uttering a sentence which gives a feeling that your buyer can be replaced or your buyer is unimportant, you are not using you phrasing. You phrasing implies that you have to think from a buyer perspective. You have to show them the value. You have to show them the respect. You have to give them the feeling that they are important and they cannot be just easily replaced. And I should tell you that's not very easy. It's not easy because we are not used or we are not programmed to this way of thinking. It requires practice, it requires a lot of practice, but that's definitely possible. But as I already mentioned, that you phrasing is important to get the buy-in from your prospects. Why? Because by using you phrasing, you make a perception, you let them perceive that you are being part of their tribe, you are being part of their family. So all these examples which I shared with you, none of them were through you messaging. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, this was all about power messaging. Once again, in the first episode, the last time, we learned how we could make ourselves appeal to the emotional old brain. We learned how to avoid the attention hammock and how we could increase the retention rate by using big pictures. Today, we learned how we handle the objections by reframing those objections, how to use strategic storytelling as part of the business presentations to make ourselves more memorable. And last but not least, let's make sure that we start practicing you phrasing to be perceived as part of the family. And once again, as I already mentioned, you have to use power messaging to improve your context, to deliver your content in an effective way. And with this, I would like to leave with you with a quick video that shows power messaging in action.
You know, once in a while, something comes along that changes the way we live. A device so simple and intuitive, using it feels almost familiar. Introducing the 2015 IKEA catalog. It's not a digital book or an e-book. It's a book. The first thing to note is no cables, not even a power cable. The 2015 IKEA catalog comes fully charged and the battery life is eternal. The interface is 7.5 by 8 inches, but can expand to 15 by 8 inches. The navigation is based on tactile touch technology that you can actually feel. Content comes pre-installed via 328 high-definition pages of inspiring home furnishing ideas. To start browsing, simply touch and drag. Right to left to move forwards. Left to right to move backwards. Notice something else? That's right, no lag. Each crystal clear page loads instantaneously, no matter how fast you scroll. If you want to get a quick overview, just hold it in the palm of your hand and using just your thumb, speed browse the content. If you find something you want to save for later, you can simply bookmark it. And even if you close the application, you can easily find the bookmark again. Amazing. What about multiple users? For that, we've introduced a simple color coding system to avoid confusion. If you want to share a particularly inspiring item, you literally share it. Another special feature is password protection, which is voice activated. Excuse me, that's mine. At IKEA, we feel that technology, this life enhancing, should be in the hands of everyone. So the 2015 IKEA catalog is free. You can download one from your mailbox, the one you open with a key. If it's not there, try refresh the next day. Or you can upload yourself to the IKEA store and find one there. Experience the power of a book.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was power messaging. With this, I would again like to ask you some questions. It's the feedback time. So if you found this episode useful or even the last episode useful, please do mention that in the comment section. If there is specific areas which you want to learn more, do mention that. If there is something which you want to change or you want to be improved, again, feel free to share your suggestions. My contact details are also provided here, my email as well as the link to the Facebook page. So in case you would like to understand some of these things in detail, feel free to reach out. If you have a specific opportunity or a specific situation which you would like to discuss something in a one-on-one fashion, again, feel free to reach out. Again, if you want to also understand how we have transformed in Alfresco, the pre-sales organization using power messaging, happy to also share those experiences. So contact me on any of these channels, and we are more than happy to pencil some time in the diaries to discuss through your questions or any of the specific situations that you want to discuss. I would also like to now go for a very big thing. That was a surprise for today's episode, that we are giving a 30 minutes voucher, a 30 minutes consultation voucher, which worth 100 euros absolutely for free today. So if you want to have a 30 minutes consultation with me, discuss anything that you would like to, then we are more than happy to give a $100 or 100 euros to be precise free voucher. Just let us know whether you are interested by providing your name and contact details on which we can reach you in the comment section. The admin team is going to pick up all the names, and then we are going to do a draw, and then we will inform the lucky one through that contact or through that email, and then we will let you know. So if you're interested in a 30 minutes free consultation with me discussing any sales situation, just drop your name along with the contact information, and we are going to do the draw, and we will inform the lucky one after this session, latest by end of this week. So feel free to do so if you're interested. And with this, I would also like to open up the session for any questions. So if you have any questions, again, you can drop those questions in the chat section, and the admin team will pick it up, and I'm going to answer those questions. I know that I've already received some of those questions in advance, so I'm going to go through them, and in the meantime, you can leave your questions there. So I received one question coming from Zohaib, Sales and Marketing, that please share a tip of negotiating the deals, especially with higher management from client side. Okay, so yeah, so there could be many tips which I could share, how to negotiate with your customer. But okay, you're asking for a tip. Maybe I'll share one or two tips here right now. So first thing which I would definitely like to mention is that before you go into a negotiation round, if it's a negotiation round with a big team where people from procurement, from business, and from management all are sitting, I strongly advise that you speak one-on-one with your champion, with your supporter before the meeting. So you definitely, during the buying process, you have won some ambassadors, won some your supporters. So if you get the chance to speak with them one-on-one before the meeting, before that big negotiation round, you can align on the expectation, and then you could also align on their support that they can provide you during the meeting. So that is something which I always recommend. Another tip which I can give you for big negotiation rounds is to try to understand the motivation of your buyer. So for example, if there is a CIO or if there is a project lead, and you understand that what makes him happy, what makes him successful. We all know that for every person, there are two things which matter the most. One is if there's a new project which they are embarking or they are running, they want to see that project successful for the team or for the organization. And some of the individuals also rely on their success to get promotion in the company, to be recognized more within their company. So you have to show how you could make that individual also successful. So it's one thing is showing the success to the company, and the other thing is showing success to that individual. If you are able to send that message across, you're naturally going to get that support from that economic buyer or from the key sponsor, and that's also going to help you during the negotiation. So many other techniques could also be shared, but I believe that these two tips are enough for the moment. Okay, the next question coming from a development manager. What is he asking? How to sell a product or an idea that seems totally unacceptable for audience? Okay, very good question, Lata. So this is something that we discussed early in the presentation when we were discussing about objection reframing. So naturally, we are going to get the objections from your audience, and sometimes they are just unacceptable of the idea and or the product that you're proposing. My suggestion would be try to understand why they are thinking like this, whether there is a logical or a rational reason, or whether there is an emotional reason. Because the response would vary once you understand whether it's a rational or an emotional reason or an objection. So if it's a rational objection, so for example, they don't see the numbers, they don't see the business case, then you have to work on providing the business case. You have to show them what is your target market, how you're going to basically launch that product, how you're going to make the money, maybe gather some facts and data from the analyst reports. So you have to provide the business case to get their acceptance, but that's a logical way of responding it. But when doing this, when you're analyzing it and you come across that they are objecting because of an emotional reason, maybe they made some bad experiences with a similar solution or a similar provider in the past, maybe they have some bad associations or some fear, something which did not work. Once you have understood that reason, then you have to think about how you could mitigate that concern. Maybe your product or your idea doesn't have that problem. Maybe you provide a demo or a proof of concept where you show that you are not going to give them the same experience that they faced in the past. So you could overcome those emotional objections because of something that didn't work for them in the past. So again, bottom line is try to understand why the people are not accepting that idea, if it's a rational or an emotional reason, and then you have to address it appropriately. Hope it helps. Otherwise, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to discuss it in detail. The next question that came from Asim, the CEO and principal: any good references or books you consider authentic for sales and during COVID, a good bedtime read? Yes, it's a good question. Just give me a second. Let me pick the book for you. Just give me a second. Yes. So I think I also mentioned this book the last time, Conversations That Win the Complex Sale. You can also find it on Amazon. That's a book which I strongly recommend for having effective, powerful, and impactful sales conversations. So you could get this book. I would say, the must read for every sales or every sales engineer. Nothing to do with COVID, but okay, if COVID is giving you enough time for a bedtime read, then go for this book. I strongly recommend that book. Okay. The next one: how to respond if someone is deliberately asking illogical questions in order to disturb your session. Okay, coming from Qasim, Director Strategy and Product Development. Okay, yeah, during the sessions, you come across all type of people, and sometimes people ask stupid questions. So if you expect, or if you know that those people are sitting in your audience, you may want to tailor your presentation flow by parking all the questions towards the end, so that at least you run through your session, you run through the presentation before you open the floor for any questions. That's one thing you could use. Also, what you could do is that, I mean, if you start seeing that the questions are very illogical, do not really align with the theme of the presentation, be open and just tell them that your focus is A, and the question is not related to the talk, and that could be basically discussed or can be taken up offline. And of course, if there are other people who are actually interested in the talk or in the session, they will also support you if you are going to park that discussion. But yeah, I mean, you can't avoid those people attending your session, but you could use these, I would say, tricks to at least make sure that they have at least impact on your session, on your presentation. Okay, so I believe that was it. And if there are any further questions, my admin team will pick them up and we will then get back to you via an email or whatever channel that you are communicating with. And once again, thank you very much for your time. Have a great day, have a great week, and see you next time. Thank you so much.